Hello, it's a privilege to be sharing on Psalm 68 today. It's a long psalm, 35 verses in all, so I won't read it all, or my time will be gone before I can comment on any of it. But please do read it. For now, I want to share some thoughts about just the first 10 verses. Firstly, this is a psalm of David, written as a song. One Bible commentary describes it as a march of memory and expectation as we hear about a procession from verse 24. The psalm starts with referencing Numbers chapter 10 when the Israelites leave Sinai and head towards Canaan. And it says at the beginning of Psalm 68, "May God arise," this is a bit from Numbers, "may his enemies be scattered, may his foes flee before him." We then hear about wind, smoke and fire, all references to God's presence as the people call on God to destroy the wicked before declaring that the righteous are glad and rejoice before God. David is a great musician and worshipper, and he encourages us to sing to God and rejoice in him as he's a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. He sets the lowly in families and even leads out the prisoners on this great procession. But then follows another warning that the rebellious will live in a sun-scorched land. We're reminded next about how God was with his people in the wilderness, how God provided for and refreshed his people in hard times, how he even went before them. This is an encouragement to all of us who feel alone or who are going through hard times. We've just lived through a wilderness time of lockdowns and isolation. If there's ever been a time when most, if not all of us could relate to this, it's been these last couple of years. But be encouraged. God is a father to you. He's your defender. He sets you in a family, and remember that whether the word family provokes good feelings of your natural family, or whether it brings to your mind memories of frustration, division, or maybe even grief, the church is a great family for you. And when we go through wilderness times like the people of God did, God is our provider and refresher. Just reflect for a moment. How has God provided for you over these last 2 years? How has he refreshed you? I'm thankful to God that he provided food for my family and I every day during lockdown, even when the shelves were empty and the delivery slots were taken. He refreshed me when someone sent me a prayer guide to help me connect with God every day, and I used apps like Lectio 365 to help me focus on him. Although lockdown was hard, God strengthened me every day. What's your testimony of God being with you during that or another wilderness time? Why don't you share your story with someone else in LifeSpring Church, your church family, to encourage them? And remember this week that God is your Father. He is your defender. He is your provider, your refreshment. He's the one who's set you in a family and is with you in the wilderness seasons, wanting to be all these things to you. We try to somehow avoid the wilderness. We want life to be joyful and happy all the time. But could it be that we experience all these attributes of God to a greater degree when life is challenging? Be encouraged. The presence of God will be your protection from the enemies around you, but will also comfort you in the hardest of times. I used to be a police officer, and I lost count of the number of times when I turned up to an incident and it was made immediately clear that I wasn't welcome. After all, who wants the police hanging around if you're up to no good? Nobody wants to be caught out. Nobody wants to be dealt with if they're breaking the law. I remember once being first on the scene of a burglary and realising the offenders were still on the premises. I needed help. I needed more officers and preferably a dog unit to help me surround the building before going in. So I got my radio, I called up and I asked for backup, and I asked for a silent approach, which means be quiet as you come near the building, no sirens. But one unit didn't hear the request for a silent approach, and it definitely made the job harder. When the police are present, the criminals will scatter. But I also lost count of the number of times when I'd turn up as a police officer and at least someone would say, "Thank goodness you're here." Because we were a comfort to people who needed our help. You see, when God arises, he is present. If we're against the purposes of God, then his presence causes us to scatter. It's a threat to us. We don't want to be exposed or destroyed. But when God is our Father, if we're one of his children, then his presence is welcomed and is a blessing to us. When we truly understand that God is for his people and is with us, even in the wilderness times, we will respond in worship as David encourages us to do. He said in this psalm, "Sing to the Lord, sing in praise to his name." God bless.